What is up, everybody? This is Christopher Rennie here, wanting to give you a little preview of what is coming up on this episode of The Chris Rennie Show. This episode is going to be very college football specific, and I'm going to go into detail on why a certain specific numbers of college football teams can win the national championship. And I will give you my methodology on how I came up with these criterias and decided on the teams I chose. Now that National Signing Day is officially complete and all players who are leaving have had to declare for the NFL draft, I think it's a good time to look ahead to the future of college football. Thank you and enjoy the show. I can't do this anymore. What's this guy saying? Who gave these national radio hosts these jobs? Jeez. Can't even understand that guy. What's he even talking about? I can't take it anymore. Those national media personalities making you feel like that, make a change. Listen to this idiot about the sports that matter from the opinion that matters. Haha, you said it, not me. Now for today's takes from the most opinionated host in sports talk. It is showtime, everybody. This is your host, Christopher Rennie, welcoming you in for The Chris Rennie Show, episode 6. To get this show underway, I'm just going to invite you to follow me on Twitter at ChrisRennieCFB and follow the show page that is now created at Chris Rennie Show on Twitter. So this episode is a little special to me. I'm a big college football fan. And being a big college football fan, that means I'm excited for college football season to get underway. And seeing these spring practices and these spring workouts already getting started, it's already getting me itching for some more college football. Now, for those of you who don't know, who listen to the Chris Rennie Show exclusively, I do a show dedicated to my alma mater, Ohio State, college football. Specifically, it's my favorite sport, always has been, always will be. So every single year I do this activity, whether I record it or not, that sort of came to my mind one year when I was reading through some pieces by Andy Staples, Stuart Mandel, a lot of the guys that are at The Athletic now. It was even before then. And I thought to myself, what is a national championship contender? How do we know going into the season what a national championship contender can and may be? Well, I myself came up with some seriously important criteria that you always see the people in the media talking about, but never at once. So I created a subjective/objective rating system, and it is what defines a national title contender. And it looks into the 8 teams. That is how many I did. There are 8 teams. Every single year I pick 8 teams. 7 legitimate contenders and a long shot that can win a national title. Last year, my long shot was Texas A&M. They failed. This year, you'll have to find out who my long shot is. But to get into this show, I've got to start with the criteria. So the first aspect of my criteria is the importance of recruiting. Recruiting to me is broken down into 2 categories, and those categories are teams that find their players and teams that find the best players for them. So there's teams that find the best players. They have the most blue chip talent. They have the best recruits coming to their school in the country year in, year out. They aren't recruiting for need. They're recruiting talent. That's one of them. Then there's others, schools that have set the precedent for this, the example for this, that find their players. The Washingtons, the Stanfords, the Michigan States under D'Antonio when they were good. They're smaller schools with sort of recruiting. They have trouble in their area. There's not a lot of natural homegrown talent in those areas. So they have to expand. They have to go and they have to find some less spotlighted players throughout the country. I know Michigan State's old strategy was recruiting Ohio, and once Ohio got their 12, 13 guys from Ohio State, once they chose their class, Michigan State would come in and pick and choose the ones they can fill in their class. Washington goes into California. They have the best recruiting class in the state of California this year, them and Oregon, those two teams. They find their players, they fill the roster out nationally, and they have to really, really develop scouting-wise. But the other team, they get the best players, and then it's just about developing them. There's only a few programs in that category, and most of them hit this list. The next one, this is actually a new category. It kind of adds to the importance of recruiting. That criteria is blue chip talent. Blue chip talent are 4- and 5-star recruits that are most certainly going to hit as a player and contribute to your team at some point in their college football careers. The teams with the best talent usually have blue chip talent that they develop into insane talent. This happens at schools like LSU, Alabama, Ohio State, and I'd say the top 7 SEC schools, the top 5 Big Ten schools, the top 3 ACC, and the top 3 Pac-12 schools, and the top 3 Big 12 schools. That happens at those ones. So there's about 25 schools in the country, 25 to 30 schools in the country that can get legitimate blue chip talent on a consistent basis. Now, the best teams are the ones who can get the best talent on the most consistent basis and continue to develop them into even greater talent. That's where you look at NFL draft numbers. That's where you look at the ability to take a guy, and I'll use Ohio State as an example because I've done my most research on their roster because of my other show, that is a 5-star recruit. Look at Chase Young this past year. He was a 5-star recruit. He was an ultra-talented football player. He was going to be successful wherever he went. But the work of Larry Johnson made him a fundamental beast, and now he is going to be the number 2 pick in the NFL draft. You see that throughout. Remember a few years ago when Alabama's defensive line was led by Quinnen Williams, that's his name. You know, they had a lot of top draft picks. Clemson with Christian Wilkins, Clelin Ferrell, all really sought-after recruits that were developed to even greater levels as players. That is blue chip talent. Blue chip talent are the guys who are going to be good no matter where they go, but are taken to that next level. They are leveled up. They are charged up. That is a term I've been seeing thrown around a lot. So yes, that is it. You got to remember, though, these blue chip talented kids still come in at 18 years old. Many of them do look like grown men, but they are raw. One comparison I have in my notes, Chase Young, he was the number 8 recruit in the country. Rashawn Gary was the most sought-after D lineman in the country. One got developed into a premier player. The other is still needing development in the NFL. So we will see. We see here that blue chip talent is not always perfect. The next thing on the list, this is arguably the most important part of the success of a program. That is the head football coach. And to make this list, the coaches have to have had or have won their conference, or at least vied for a conference title. The coaches on this list need to be proven winners, and not all the coaches on my list are popular among their fan bases at all times. But all 8 of these coaches have won at a high level with teams they have helped construct, whether that be a conference title, a New Year's Six Bowl, a national title, or have won playoff games. These coaches have built teams through recruiting and through player development, as well as being masterful in creating X's and O's in the strategy aspect of the game. The next aspect on the list is great assistant coaches. You're only as good as your supporting cast, is what they've always said. CC, Clemson, and Brett Venables. The best teams have a lot of staff turnover, but the great teams find their next in line. Many of these teams have lost assistants, whether that be through firing or adding good replacements. They have continued to move forward. some of the teams on this list do not have much staff turnover. And that is a very big advantage going into the following season. It's a huge aspect into why Clemson was able to be so successful year in and year out. And their defense is going to be just as good next year. That's how that works. The next on the list is quarterback. And I've actually got a lot to say about this position. The next valuable asset of the team that can lead to a national championship. So when you are looking at a recruiting class, Tua and Jake Fromm were in the same recruiting class. Both took over as both won games as true freshmen. Both played a lot. Jake Fromm was a starter. Tua came in and won the national title. The difference between a Tua Tagovailoa and Jake Fromm from a recruiting standpoint is not a lot. But when you look at these two guys play the sport of football, it looks significantly different. When you evaluate quarterbacks, there are so many things that go into it. And in high school, Jake Fromm had a plus arm. His football IQ was off the charts, and his anticipation on his throws has always been exceptional. But he's limited in a lot of ways, whether that be athletically, arm strength-wise, or his offensive style that he plays in. So here's another example of that. The difference between Justin Fields and Dorian Thompson-Robinson is huge. Justin Fields was the number 2 ranked recruit. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was 36. In recruiting, that is not a lot. That is a 34 rank difference. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, not hating on the guy, but he's not Justin Fields. That huge gap from the top quarterbacks in a class, usually down to that third or fourth quarterback. I know a lot goes into composite rankings, but a lot of the times there's a significant gap. And the change of play pace at the next level has a huge impact on the way these guys can cognitively see the game. And that's priority number 1. That's why Fromm came in right away and was able to play quarterback successfully and lead Georgia to a national title. Cognitively, he was ahead of the curve. Tua was also in that way. So was Trevor Lawrence. So was Justin Fields. And if you guys are getting where I'm going, this is why quarterbacks are so important. There are a lot of really good quarterbacks in college football, but there are a few great ones year in and year out. So the 8 teams I have chosen have some of the most talented signal callers in the country, or have shown the ability to develop ones that will not lose games. Half of these teams have elite or very good quarterbacks. The other half of these teams either have not found their guy or are likely going to be relying on the other side of the ball. So having a returning quarterback, especially a high-level elite one, like Trevor Lawrence, like Justin Fields, instantly puts you into the national title conversation. Spoiler alert, Ohio State and Clemson look like they're on a path that has one meeting place, and that is the national title, because of those two guys. So that is what helps. Having a returning quarterback is an instant advantage, even for programs that reload at every position. Now, Ohio State lost some key contributors, but they reloaded a lot of positions, and none of that would matter if we had a true freshman starting. A lot of people would count us out early. But moving forward, Justin Fields is here. Justin Fields is a Heisman candidate already before he takes another snap. And that is why these 8 teams are on the list. So, favorable schedule. This one's very straightforward. You play your toughest games at home, and hopefully do not have those games lined up back-to-back. Any games you may slip up in are earlier in the year. The schedule LSU ran through with 7 ranked games is not a schedule many will get through unscathed. And if they lost to Texas early, there's still a major chance they still get into the postseason running off a lot of those wins they had throughout the year. But if you get through a gauntlet like that, you're obviously going to make the playoffs and have a chance to win a national title. That being said, a favorable schedule always helps, but you don't want it to be too favorable, because remember all the knocks on Clemson last year with how weak the ACC was and how weak their out-of-conference schedule was? Well, that still happens. So, yeah, you want to have a favorable schedule, not a weak schedule. So that's very clear. And then, obviously, most importantly, returning starters. When you have returning starters that did not win the national title, they feel like they fell short. Two of these teams came drives away from extending their season, and that is how painful college football can be. These returning players are usually leaders, usually a year stronger, a year more developed, a year healthier, you hope in some cases. And for the rest of them, these players are the leaders and the driving force in the locker room that lead to greatness. Ohio State last year was led by fifth years. Yes, they had a lot of talent, but the oldest guys, the Austin Macks, the KJ Hills, they led the way. In Alabama, the same sort of stuff happened. You had a lot of talent throughout it, but the leaders, look at LSU. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a leader. Joe Burrow was a leader. On the defensive side of the ball, they had leaders all over the place, young and old. But the returning players who had starting experience make a huge difference when it comes to that early season big game matchup. So that's it. So to get to my list, I want to start from the top. The teams I think are most likely to get to the national title, and to least likely, my wild card team that I add every single year to contribute. It's fun. It's fun to have one guess out there. That 500 to 1 odds. You look at Vegas, you're like, there's no chance they're going to win. Everyone's against them. Maybe not everyone, but last year I picked a pretty popular pick in Texas A&M. They had an extremely tough schedule. I said if they get through that, they have a chance to play for a national championship. So let's get into it. So the first team on my list of potential national champions next year, teams that can win a national championship. If you guys do not know who it is the University of Clemson. They're the team that came up just short, and when you look at who Clemson has returning, they have a lot of talent coming back this season. So let's get started with the criteria. We're going to go in order every single time. The head coach is Dabo Swinney. Dabo Swinney has been a winner through and through. Dabo Swinney is a guy who's been at Clemson for quite some time, has a very established culture, which is one of the biggest priorities of a head coach. Once you have the culture, everything else is easier. The recruiting, the offense, the defense, that comes easier when you have your culture and the way you want the character in your program to be. So at Clemson, Dabo Swinney has been there, now? I think this is his 10th or 11th season. He has been one of the best coaches over the last decade, for sure. 2 national titles, 6 ACC championships, has a run of dominance unmatched in that conference, 8 division titles. So he has won the Coach of the Year awards. He's done it all. He's a very well-accomplished coach, and the team recruits at an extremely high level. So when we go and we take a look at his most recent recruiting classes, he has continued to get blue-chip recruits. And when I was reading a story from The Athletic, I think it was by Chris Vanini or Max Olson, I cannot remember. I feel bad not being able to name drop the correct person, but he is, they talked about the hit percentage. So when you recruit, you want to hit on as many as you can. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. So Clemson is the 3rd-ranked recruiting class in 2020, so they're going to have some impact freshman five-star recruits. They're the highest-rated team in the ACC, so that's going to continue their run of dominance because no other team in the ACC has had consistent recruiting classes like Clemson the last couple of years. So they've been the number 1 ranked team in the ACC recruiting-wise for the last 4 years, I want to say, except 2017, but they still had the highest average rating per player. So even when they're not getting full classes, so this was an interesting stat about the 2017 class. They had 14 enrollees, and the only person they missed on was Hunter Johnson, the quarterback, who just never had his opportunity to play. So it's like, did they really miss on him? Well, if you watched him play at Northwestern, it was a miss. Plain and simple. But every single other player has contributed in a way expected or greater, all the way down to their 3 stars at the bottom. So that happens year in and year out. That's why Clemson, from a recruiting standpoint, is where they're at. You see names like T. Higgins at the top of each class. You see names like Amari Rogers, these top-tier receivers, Trevor Lawrence, Xavier Thomas, these guys who are making huge impact plays. Jackson Carman's a multi-year starter, a 5-star recruit. Justin Ross, big-time player. These guys continue to develop and explode into great players. But what makes an even greater player greater? The people who develop them. And now, great assistant coaches don't grow on trees, but Clemson has some of the best. Tony Elliott has been there quite some time. Brett Venables as well. And similar to how the Patriots are built, Clemson has had a offensive line coach there for longer than Dabo Swinney's been the head coach, Robbie Caldwell. So, this year they lost Jeff Scott, a co-offensive coordinator, and he was responsible for the receiver room. He went to USF. But besides that, this is one of the enigmas in all of college sports, is how there is not more turnover in the Clemson staff. Then you look at the quarterback position. It's Trevor Lawrence. You don't have to say much here. Everyone knows Trevor Lawrence. He's going to continue to get better this year. I think he won't have that slow start he had this year. I think he's just going to come out, be the guy who was there at the end of the year, the tough guy, the tough quarterback. He took some shots. He continued to play at an extremely high level when he was under duress. And Trevor Lawrence is definitely a key contributor and will be one of those blue chip recruits that changes the program. He already has. So, yeah, you look at that. Trevor Lawrence, there's not really any better quarterbacks on the list. So, when you keep seeing me go through this criteria, keep in mind that Clemson has hit every single part of the criteria. Now we're to favorable schedules. So, at Georgia Tech, that's a wash. That's going to be a walk in the park for Clemson if they come out motivated, which they should. They lost the last game of the season in the national title. So Georgia Tech still rebuilding, still a couple years away from being a competitive team in college football. The next team on that list is Louisville. Then they play Akron, a rebuilding Virginia. So you sort of look at it. The teams that would normally challenge Clemson, the Florida States, the Miamis, they avoid number one. Absolutely, they avoid them. But they're also not very good. The only game I can see as a little bit of a trap game is Boston College. They're reinvigorated with the Jeff Hafley hire. They recruited well to close out the 2020 class, and they have some returners. So that's the only team that I see as a trap game. Their biggest game is going to be Saturday, November 7th, after a bye week, which is very fortunate. It's against Notre Dame at Notre Dame. So it's going to be a cold weather game for a Southern team. Those usually do not bode well in November. Notre Dame gave Georgia every ounce it could. And, after that, it's pretty much a walk in the park, to reuse that term. They've got the Citadel. They're at Wake Forest, who lost their quarterback. And then they're at home for rival South Carolina. Then the ACC championship game against either Miami or a team like that. So, very favorable schedule. That's part of the criteria. So, when you look at Clemson as a team, they have a favorable schedule. So now we're to the final. This is number 6 on my list. Why they will play in the national championship. So, Clemson, after their NFL draft decisions, returned some very key starters. So, they returned Travis Etienne. They returned Justin Ross, Amari Rogers. They have Jackson Carman coming back as a starter. They have a lot of experience on the offensive line. Their center, Cade Stewart's back. And Will Putnam played a lot, but was not a starter. And that's what happened to the right tackle. So they did lose 3 starters on the offensive line, but all of their starters have experience that are coming in this year. So defensively, now we're looking at the defensive side of the football. So they returned Justin Foster, Niles Pinckney, Tyler Davis, Xavier Thomas. They returned their whole starting four on the defensive line. That is absurd. Now, they do lose Isaiah Simmons, Clemson's best defensive player, no question. Nearly impossible to replace a guy like that. He can cover slot receivers, wide receivers, doesn't matter. So, Mike Jones is not that versatile. Then they have James Skalski coming back, leading tackler from 2019. Balin Spector, another guy who had a lot of tackles. And then you get to the secondary. They have Darian Kendrick back. They're replacing their strong safety. They have Nolan Turner, a very versatile guy. He picked off Justin Fields, so I'm still a little mad about that guy. And, so they're replacing their strong safety and cornerback. But when you look at their roster, they have 15 of 22 positions coming back. And you combine that with Trevor Lawrence, it's over. Like, they're a shoo-in for the college football playoff. And I'd say, honestly, a shoo-in for the national title. So, not to win it, but to get there. So that's Clemson. Continuing forward on my list of 8 potential national champions. My number 2 on this list is the Ohio State University, my alma mater. Yes, I'm a little biased, but absolutely no biases can cover up for the fact that Ohio State is right on track to become a national championship contender and play for the national title against Clemson. There is no one stopping us. Ryan Day is a head coach for Ohio State. He's the head coach for Ohio State, I should say, to make that a little better sounding. He is an offensive guru. He works really well with developing quarterbacks and had a big integral part on the success of Justin Fields last year. Him, Corey Dennis, Mike Yursich, who I'll be talking about later. And that was a huge aspect of the success of Ohio State as a program. He brought a new level of energy to the program, a different type of energy than Urban Meyer, his predecessor. And now Ryan Day is getting his second year. He's got his footing. He's ready to roll. All those mistakes you make in your first year as a leader, as a coach, you can correct those and continue moving forward. That's where Ryan Day's at. So Ryan Day is a coach who has coached at all levels. He coached in college, had some jobs, and then went to the NFL, got brought into Ohio State from San Francisco after Chip Kelly was let go, and really reinvigorated the offense and how we saw it. He brought back NFL concepts, and that is why the progressive offense of Ohio State has taken place in the passing game, and that is why Justin Fields has been able to excel so much in the ways he has as a vertical passer. Him and Dwayne Haskins have been sensational. Ohio State's very fortunate that Justin Fields was an underclassman, or he'd probably be the second or third quarterback taken in this draft right now. So, all great coaches can win games, but the greatest coaches also recruit at an insanely high level. So, when you look at the recruiting history of Ohio State, the latest you can go back right now is 2017. Obviously, there's some fifth years, but the guys who are going to be contributing are mostly going to be from the 2017 and 2018 class. You've got loads of blue-chip prospects. Baron Browning, Sean Wade, Wyatt Davis, all 5-star guys who are going to play significant snaps this year. Josh Myers was a 4-star guy, going to play significant snaps this year. Haskell Garrett is going to work his way into the defensive tackle rotation. A lot of these guys are ready to roll. There's going to be some positions on the defensive side of the ball that need some of these blue chip guys to step up. The Marcus Williamsons, the Amir Reeps, the Cam Browns, those types of guys need to step up. And in this class, this unbelievable class Urban Meyer put together, 21 enrollees, had a .9459 rating. Many of them still in school, are ready to go. And that is where the success of Ohio State comes in. Now, in 2018, it was a smaller class. Or no, this was the 26-person class. 2019 was a smaller class. But you look once again at this 2018 class, it's Nicholas Petit-Frere, Teron Vincent, Tyreek Johnson, Jalen Gill, Tyreek Smith. It's his time to shine, Taraja Mitchell. And you see the names. All these guys are 5- and 4-star recruits. So you're talking to me, these guys are premier athletes that are being developed by premier coaches. Then you get to the 2019 class, and you have the average rating of a .9187, which would have been good for third nationally, but they're 14th because they only had 17 people in the class. It was a smaller class because some people surprised everybody and stayed. In this class, Zach Harrison, Garrett Wilson, Harry Miller, all going to be contributors this year. Probably Jamison Williams as well. On the defensive side of the ball, you never know. Defensive players emerge in a different way. You could get guys like Noah Potter stepping up, guys in the list that you don't really talk about much, but can step up and step in. But there's so many options. That is what Ohio State and Clemson have in common. They have so many options that it doesn't feel like they can go wrong anywhere. And all these recruits are great, but who's going to develop them? And Ohio State has some of the best assistant coaches in the country. Brian Hartline just won the Recruiter of the Year and was an NFL receiver who's bringing NFL-level teachings to these young superstar high school receivers. Kevin Wilson, Ryan Day's right-hand man. They see everything on the same page. Kevin Wilson's a full OC now. Greg Madison changed the dynamic of the front seven for Ohio State. Completely reinvigorated it with Larry Johnson and Al Washington's help. And then Ohio State went to the NFL again. Like they got Jeff Hafley. They brought in Kerry Coombs. Kerry Coombs is an excellent recruiter. Kerry Coombs is an excellent player developer. He has overseen a lot of first-round picks, similar to Brett Venables. Both have seen large amounts of first-round picks go through their program. So that is a huge part. And then the quarterback position, Justin Fields, similar to Trevor Lawrence, can't go wrong. Both guys versatile, both guys extremely accurate throwing the football, and both guys are really good at throwing to all levels of the field. Justin Fields changes this program. He changed it last year. We just didn't know it when we got him. So when you look at what Justin Fields brings to the table, a year of experience, and he is going to be highly motivated after his final throw. So now you take a look at this schedule. And to me, this is one of the more favorable schedules Ohio State's had in a little bit. So last year they had a wicked gauntlet. They had to play Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Clemson consecutively. Their four toughest games in a row. So that is not happening this year on the schedule. So when you go through the schedule, they start off pretty easy, and they have a very marquee road matchup against the Oregon Ducks. Once they get through that, it's smooth sailing. No Kinnick Stadium trip. Michigan State in disarray. They travel to Beaver Stadium to face the Nittany Lions of Penn State. They get Nebraska at home. They get Indiana at home. They have to go on the road to Maryland, which I think Maryland's still a year away from being a team that can knock off an Ohio State, even if Ohio State has a bad day. Illinois, always upset-minded. Memorial Stadium, Champaign. That's a trap game because it's the week before the game. Back-to-back rivalry games. A lot of people don't know that. And then the Big Ten Championship, which will probably be against a Minnesota, against a Wisconsin, against whoever. So I think this schedule is way more favorable than last year. And there's a marquee home matchup. Or no, road matchup. So that's also good for the resume. Now, why can Ohio State win this football game? They return a ton of skill on offense. They got much-needed experience at running back for Master Teague in a lot of games. Their offensive line returns so many people. Josh Myers, Wyatt Davis. They'll be replacing the right tackle and the left guard. 2 spots, but you've got Harry Miller, a 5-star recruit, ready to go. Nicholas Petit-Friere, another 5-star recruit, ready to go. And you've got, what's his name? Thayer Munford returning. And he's been an All-Big Ten selection, I think, all the years he started as a player. He was not healthy last year, so he struggled a little bit, but he's back. So you look at all those things, that's why Ohio State can win the national title. Talent, quarterback, favorable schedule. Checked all the boxes. 2 teams check all those boxes. Now, the next team on my list, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Nick Saban, no one doesn't like him. Nick Saban's career record is absurd. I don't even want to see it, but I'm going to look it up right now. Probably should have looked it up before the show. Doesn't matter. You guys don't. It's more fun when I do it this way. It's more natural. I do all my research on my own. So at Alabama, he is 152-23. He has lost 23 football games. Last year he lost 2 games and it was seen as a failure. They lost their quarterback to a serious hip injury, and they got upset by their rival. So, I mean, was it really that big of a failure? I don't think so for what the circumstances were. You know, you sort of look at what Alabama brings to the table. It's great. So when I talk about recruits, blue chip recruits, the only team with more blue chip prospects than Clemson and Ohio State is Alabama. Alabama leads the way with 4- and 5-star recruits. They are a machine that recruits. And people throw all these aspects around, but Nick Saban's been doing this a long time. He understands how a program's supposed to run. He is an expert at building cultures. That is Nick Saban's greatest strength, and maximizing the potential of his defensive backs. Those are his 2 greatest strengths. He's not a guy who's scared to give up parts of control to other people, and he is a guy who is always looking to get better, even with that career record I read to you guys. Those personality traits make for a program that is going to rebound this year. The key assistant coach is Scott Cochran. He's been the strength and conditioning coach for Nick Saban since he got to Alabama, an extremely important piece in the success at Alabama. He builds a culture from the spring till spring practices and over the summer during summer workouts. He's the guy in contact with all the players. At Ohio State, it's Mickey Marotti. I'm not sure who it is at Clemson, but every single top team has a top strength and conditioning coach. That's how it works. So the one question mark Alabama has, now we're getting to teams with question marks. The quarterback position, Mac Jones or Bryce Young. I don't think you can go wrong with either. I think Bryce Young sort of brings a more, I want to say, let's think about this. I want to say this right before I think about it. Bryce Young brings a way higher ceiling for the team. But on a game-to-game basis, he may bring a lower floor. You don't know how Bryce Young is going to react to... Wow, that's impressive. Okay. I get it. So I was confused. 24/7 broke it down into enrollees and signed letter of intents instead. So I was like, they only got 13 guys enrolled, but that's not the case. So Bryce Young went to Mater Dei. He played at Rancho Cucamonga, the same place that, or not Rancho Cucamonga. He played at like Cathedral as a school in LA, Catholic school, big school, very talented football program. They get a lot of those kids in that LA area, and they win a lot of football games. But he ended up going to Alabama. A California kid going to Alabama, a West Coast kid going to play quarterback at Alabama. Bryce Young's a good athlete. When you look at his evaluation on 24/7 Sports, he has a little bit of an elongated release, but he's got a live arm. He's got a great ability to throw outside the pocket. When you look at Mac Jones' recruiting profile, it's similar. Mac Jones is more of that traditional Alabama quarterback. You've seen the Jake Coker, the guys, they're less exciting. That would be the best way to put it. When you look at Alabama and you look at Mac Jones, Mac Jones played very well in his time in as a quarterback. He lost to Auburn. Well, he gave it his all in that game. When you look at what Mac Jones did in that final game, it really excites you for the 21-year-old. He is capable. He won big games. And it's always a competition there. I think he's going to be the starting quarterback this year. I think Bryce Young is going to be the backup. And I think Mac Jones is a guy who brings an exciting skill set. When you look at Mac Jones and you see this quarterback position, this is a peculiar position for Alabama. It's similar to what they did with Jalen Hurts when he started and what they did to Tua with Tagovailoa when Tua took the job over. So when you look at Mac Jones, he was a 4-star recruit, not nearly as sought after as Bryce Young. But you really like what you see from him and what you saw in the games he played. When you look at his season stats, he was very productive in his starts. Taking a look at his game by games, 327, 3 touchdowns against Michigan's defense, 4 touchdown passes against Auburn. Lost that game 48-45. It was a who was going to have the ball last type of game. Very efficient against Western Carolina, which sort of got his footing. He played in a lot of games, took over as a starter in the Arkansas game, 8 for 22. He's accurate. He's got really good receivers to throw to. He knows the system. So I'm not scared for Alabama with Mac Jones. Absolutely not. And then you look at their schedule, and I think it is one of their more favorable ones. So they play USC, Georgia State. They've got Georgia at home. So their cross-division rival, they got at home. They do have to go to Tennessee, but that's before an off week. They have to go to LSU, but LSU doesn't have Joe Burrow anymore. And then they get Texas A&M and Auburn at home. So they split their biggest games on the road and at home half and half. I think Alabama's going to come back motivated. I think that's a big reason they're going to be able to win this game. So the reasons Alabama can win are they have elite talent returning. So how does Forrest Gump say it? Alabama. They've got Devontae Smith returning, which was huge. They've got Alex Leatherwood at left tackle returning, and they've got Dylan Moses coming back from injury, who can very much be very crazy. Jalen Waddle's back, and, they have so much talent coming in that you really can't take it away. They were not as elite last year defensively, but they're getting players back. And that's insane. You get a guy like Dylan Moses back in the fold at middle linebacker. He changes the whole look of your defense. Now, to get going, I think Alabama wins this because of their talent. I think they're a national title contender because of talent, because of coaching, and because of the culture of the program. They're going to come back ready, firing on all cylinders. They are one of the 8 teams. They should always be considered for these lists every single year. Next team on the list of the 8. This is number 4 on the list. Also an SEC team. There are 4 SEC teams on this list. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense. Not all of them can win the national title. But all of them have the potential to, and that's what this list is about. So the next team on the list, the 4th team on this list is Georgia. Playing in the little bit weaker SEC East, Kirby Smart is the head coach. He is a very good defensive head coach. He lost a fluky game to South Carolina last year and then got waxed by LSU in the conference title. But once again, 10-win season, very successful year. Kirby Smart's done that year in, year out. So the one thing Georgia does better than anyone in the country, it feels like right now, is getting talent. Talent accumulation is Kirby Smart's greatest asset as the head coach. He gets the best running backs. He gets super talented receivers. He gets really good offensive linemen. Defensively, they have talent coming in and out, and you see it. And when you look at their recruiting over the years, it's just been so sensational. Kirby Smart is an ace recruiter. So when you look at Georgia's recruiting, it's just crazy that they have the number 1 recruiting class. This year, they are always near it. When you look at how they've recruited over the last years, it's number 3, it's number 2, it's number 1. You continue to see that, and they get a lot of people flipping to it, and it's crazy. That was never the case. They used to get them flipped. So they got the number 1 prospect from 10 states, which is absolutely absurd. That was last year, I want to say. They did that. And then they just keep getting all these top recruits. Oh, wow, that's crazy. So in its classes, the number 1 overall high school prospect and the number 1 junior college prospect, they've done that. They've signed the number 1 inside linebacker, number 1 weak side defensive end, which is crazy. The number 4, number 5 receivers. So they're getting extremely highly rated talent. So that's checked off the list, period. Where Georgia has struggled has been in their offensive excitement. Todd Monken, extremely exciting play caller. He rebuilt the App State program, got him, or was it Southern Mississippi. Southern Mississippi. They got Matt Luke as their offensive line coach, former Ole Miss coach, great recruiter. And this is not three coordinators here. One's an offense coordinator. Todd Monken's going to be working very closely with Jamie Newman at quarterback. Matt Luke going to get that offensive line ready and get that run game going. And Cortez Hankton, the passing game coordinator. He is a young guy. He comes over from Vanderbilt. Kirby Smart's looking for something that like Joe Brady did for LSU. He wants them to unlock the passing game, add these modern concepts, and continue to develop quarterbacks at a high level. A lot of people discredit Jake Fromm because of the limited numbers he put up, but that is partly due to the methodical play-action style of offense they've ran the last couple of years. So Georgia gets a gift at quarterback. Jamie Newman, former Wake Forest quarterback, absolutely electric, extremely talented, strong-armed, good athlete player. And, hear me out, they have a very, very favorable conference schedule. The only non-favorable game is at Alabama, and if they lose it, they will have a chance to replay them in the conference title. So, at Alabama is their toughest game. They get Virginia, who's going to be rebuilding a little bit this year, as an out-of-conference matchup. They get Auburn at home. They get Florida in that neutral site game in Jacksonville. They get Tennessee at home, and they get their rival Georgia Tech at home. So, very favorable schedule. They might have the most favorable schedule, in my opinion, on the list, minus Alabama, obviously. They dodge LSU this year, which is huge. You don't want to ever play Alabama and LSU if you're in the East in the same year. I think the only teams who got through that successfully were the Urban Meyer Florida teams. And that was because Alabama was a little down, and that's the only reason, to be honest. So when you go through why Georgia can win this and compete for a national title, they have elite talent across the board, and they possibly have a revitalized offensive system. I think Kirby Smart understands that they need to move the offensive forward into the 21st century. They can't have one of those 1995 pro-style West Coast offenses in the college football ranks. They need to be fun. They need to be explosive. They need to learn how to get these athletes they have into space. And if they do that, they can legitimately compete for a national title. So the next team on my list is the LSU Tigers, who return quite a bit of talent. Ed Orgeron is still looking to replace passing coordinator Joe Brady, but when you look at LSU, they have incredible depth due to recruiting, very similar to Georgia. Top 5, top 10 classes year in, year out. That's how you build a program, plain and simple. An interesting anecdote to sidebar this conversation a little bit. I was reading about Stuart Mandel's Monday mailbag or Wednesday mailbag, and a big conversation that was had was what you need. And having a top 10 recruiting class is the epitome of what you need. If you can get top 5s consistently, which is very rare, it happens. But when you look at the likes of teams getting in the 40s and 50s and then getting a top 10 recruiting class, that 1 year is going to hurt a lot. And you're going to fall short depth-wise because of that year. So that is one thing LSU has not done. And their incredible depth due to recruiting is huge moving forward because they lost a lot of talent. Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 2 or 3 offensive linemen, if I remember correctly. On the defensive side of the ball, they lost their best corner. Arguably, they lost the guy who won the Thorpe Award and didn't deserve it. And, but they also replaced a lot. They still have Kalavon Chason, I believe, or he must have entered the draft too, man. LSU does not have a lot of guys returning. So that's a challenge. But they do have a very strong infrastructure and coaching staff. Steve Ensminger was a guy who, with Joe Brady, developed this offense that was phenomenal. Where does the credit go? I don't know. We're really going to see next year. Bo Pelini played for national titles at Youngstown State, former Nebraska coach, always 9-3. Really good defenses, though. So losing Joe Brady is probably the biggest loss they had. The way he developed the quarterbacks was extremely beneficial. Now you got Miles Brennan, he's probably the starter. And he looked a little rough when he was in those games. So when you look at their schedule, it's one of those ones. I think it's very favorable. They've got Texas at home, their biggest marquee matchup. If they get through that, it's pretty smooth sailing until they have to play Florida on the road, but they get Florida after they play Nicholls State. And then they get Alabama at home. They have to go into Jordan-Hare to play Auburn, and they have to go into College Station. So there's two options for LSU this year. They go 11-1, play for the SEC championship, and make it into the playoff if they win that. Or they go 8-4. This is why we're at 5 on the list. This is how fast it happens. Their returning defensive stars are going to lead the way. The Derek Stinleys, those guys who were vital parts to the success they had this year, are going to lead the way for another run at a national title. Will they do it? I don't know. We're at number 5 on the list. The next team on the list, Auburn, number 6, head coach Gus Malzahn, the most love-hated coach on the planet, one of the offensive gurus that brought the RPO, read option, spread game to the mainstream of college football at the level it's at, was a huge part in the role of Cam Newton and that successful team that won the national championship. Took the job at Arkansas State, built that up. Then once Gene Chizik was fired, Gus Malzahn took that over. So one of the biggest moves that Auburn had done in the offseason was bring in Chad Morris. Now, will Gus Malzahn relinquish control to Chad Morris for play calling duties? I don't think so. I don't think he has that in him. And the other coach is Kevin Steele, their defensive coordinator. Getting that defense better and getting the talent they have on the defensive side of the ball playing at the level it needs to is going to be vital on the success of Auburn. Now they have top 10 to 15 classes the last 5 years, so their recruiting is not at the level of the first 5 teams I've talked about. But they're a program that is strong at developing the talent they get. They find their players and they develop them really well, especially on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, that's why Kevin Steele is highlighted. It's going to be very important. Bo Nix is a guy. He's their quarterback. He is going to be extremely vital, and his development, and this is where Chad Morris comes in. He developed Taj Boyd. He helped Deshaun Watson. You know, he went to the NFL, was big in the NFL his 2 years in Tampa Bay, and now he's back. So a lot of the talk is when coaches leave for the NFL and come back, they are reinvigorated. They bring new concepts, new principles, and new teaching methods to it. And I think Bo Nix can really, really thrive in that environment. So when you look at why Auburn can win the national title, North Carolina is their marquee out-of-conference game. They get Kentucky at home. They have to go to Georgia, but they get Texas A&M at home. They get LSU at home. So 2 of their huge games in division are at home, and they have to go to Alabama. That's going to be their toughest game of the year, and it's going to be one of the best games of the season, absolutely no questions asked. And then if they win the SEC championship, they're going to have to play Florida or Georgia. So that is a favorable schedule, not as favorable as some of the other ones, but still favorable. So how can Auburn win this national championship? Chad Morris brings in an electric style offense, and, you know, he lost a lot at Arkansas. I misspoke. I was thinking Todd Monken. Chad Morris is the guy from Clemson, went to Arkansas, totally botched it. He's still really good at developing quarterbacks. I was right about all the ones I named, right? Yeah. No, I was. Deshaun Watson, yeah. He did not go to the NFL. That is the only place I misspoke. But he will be reinvigorated because he was fired. Now, that and quarterback play. So, if Chad Morris can go back to what he did with Deshaun Watson and what he did with Taj Boyd, then this team can win a national title because of how explosive the offenses can be potentially. Next on the list, Texas, Tom Herman, head coach. OK, Cool Hook'em, really struggled last year. 24/7 Sports, they recruit extremely well. The biggest aspect on why they're on this list at number 7 is the major staff turnover. They fired Orlando and Tim Beck. Mike Yurcik and Chris Ash. Yurcik was the former OC at Oklahoma State, took the passing game coordinator title at Ohio State, and developed Justin Fields. So this is where this gets really beneficial. When you look at what Sam Ehlinger is, he needs help developing as a passer. So once you get that figured out, then we're in a really good place as a team if we're Texas. You know what I'm saying? So once you get Sam Ehlinger consistently throwing the ball downfield effectively, it's awesome. And a reinvigorated defense with Chris Ash. So yes, Rutgers sucked under Ash. You cannot deny that. Rutgers was terrible. But Chris Ash is a great defensive coordinator, and he was part of that Urban Meyer National Championship team. So Tom Herman is utilizing the Ohio State tie for the last time, I believe, with these hires. And I think Mike Yurcik and Chris Ash are going to come in and do a great job. And when you look at past recruiting, when you look at Texas in these past classes, they are a team that has the talent to win big. They've had a thorn in their paw as Longhorns in Oklahoma, but they recruit better than them. So the previous year they were 3. The year before that they were 3. They are recruiting like a team that should be winning national championships. Their 2018 class and their 2019 class are going to be ready to contribute. When you go to their 2018 class, the class that's going to make up most of the starters, Vernon Broughton, going to be a very important player. He needs to continue to develop. Their offensive line's built through this class. They're going to need Bijan Robinson to come up big, and then they're going to need to continue to develop their players. That is where Tom Herman has struggled, and that is where I think Chris Ash, and Mike Yurcik, their biggest strength is. So the key to them winning the national title is how much Mike Yurcik can get out of Sam Ehlinger. And the other key is reinvigorating the defensive effort and using that talent they recruited to its fullest potential. And if they do that, they have a chance to win the national title. So my last team on the list, this is the wild card. This is what we're going to close out the show talking about. And then my missed the cut. This is an hour-long show. It's already a little long. I was trying to get as in-depth as possible and still talk about 8 teams. So the last team on my list is going to surprise a lot of you. But it is supposed to. It is a long shot that I think can win the national title. So get excited. To me, the long shot team that can win the national title are the USC Trojans. Now, hear me out. Yes, I know Clay Helton, not the greatest coach. I know that. Don't come start attacking me. This is a long shot. Remember that. Last year was Texas A&M. How'd that turn out? So this is a long shot. Absolutely a long shot. USC football. So when you go back to their 2017 class, it was number 4 in the country. You hear me out. So this is what you've got. You've got some super talented players that are going to be taking that last final step in their developmentalness, getting ready to hopefully prepare for the NFL. In 2018, hear me out. This is the other class that's going to be extremely important. They had the number 4 class nationally. And now in 2019, they had the 19th ranked class. So yes, they're falling off a little bit recruiting-wise. Part of that is because of the way that Clay Helton has been handled. The other part is because they have not been being that great. I think this is the year that saves Clay Helton, and I think they have a favorable schedule to do it. So their schedule will do their schedule first. So they have to play Alabama. You're going to lose that game, absolutely. They're going to get smoked. But then you get New Mexico. You go at Stanford. I think Stanford's going to be very beatable next year. Arizona State, I think, is going to be tough, but I think they can win that at home. Utah's on the road. That's going to be their toughest matchup of the season until Notre Dame because of the location they have to play it. I think there are some key pivotal matchups, and if they win those games, they will have the resume to play for a national title. I do not think they will upset Alabama, but they do have the offensive firepower to challenge them. I think they beat the Utes. I think the Utes are rebuilding, but I think they beat them. The Oregon Ducks, they don't have Justin Herbert this year. We're going to really see what Mario Cristobal is made of and what they can do to develop a quarterback. And they got the Washington Huskies at home with Jimmy Lake, a new head coach. Notre Dame at home, the 28th rivalry weekend is going to be a game that is bigger than everyone else thinks. This is my dark horse game of the year candidate. the Notre Dame Fighting Irish versus USC. That is what it's about. So, are we ready for that? I don't know. Why can't it happen, though? Offensively, they kept Graham Harrell. They retained him. And one man's trash is another man's treasure. That's the epitome of what Todd Orlando is to USC. Can he get the most out of the offensive talent they recruited? Maybe, maybe not. The one place that they are strong is at wide receiver. They returned 3 major contributors with Tyler Vaughn and co. Caden Slovis, JT Daniels, both excellent, young, talented quarterbacks. I think either of them can lead this team to the promised land. And yes, I'm not a USC homer, absolutely not. I've always disliked USC, but when I was just looking for a dark horse, they met the criteria. Their oldest players are going to be in recruiting classes 4th ranked, and 9th ranked. So that's crazy. 3 top 10 classes on the roster. Then it gets worse, 13th, and then whatever it is. They have an excellent quarterback, whether it be Caden Slovis or JT Daniels, whoever ends up winning that job. And their schedule, a little tougher. But if they get through it, that was what I said about Texas A&M. If they get through it, they will be competing for a national championship. So to close this show out, I'm going to quickly go through 5 teams that just missed the cut. The first team on this list that just missed the cut as a national title contender is Penn State. Micah Parsons is an unbelievable defensive stud. Miles Sanders at running back is a very talented running back. And the receiver position at Penn State is solid. But when you have Sean Clifford as your starting quarterback, you're not going to win a national championship. Boom, missed the cut. The University of Michigan, that team up north, I hate their guts. Dylan McCaffrey, if he was as talented as they said, he would have been able to start when Shea Patterson transferred. He's not. He's not very good. Their other quarterback, what's his name? He's bigger. We'll look this up real quick. I had his name in my head. You know when you have that name in your head and they just sort of just... Joe Milton, that's his name. Joe Milton, that's what Google says, so that's what we'll go with. So who's it going to be? Cade McNamara is a good quarterback. Joe Milton's a very large quarterback. Strong-armed quarterback. You know, they've got quite a few good recruits. But I do not believe in any of them. I also do not believe in the ability of Jim Harbaugh to develop one of these guys into a premier passer. And I do not believe in the ability of... And I do not believe in Josh Gaddis as a play caller. So, offensively, I just don't believe in them. They had a ton of staff turnover. They lost a lot of coaches to other places. It continued to happen. They brought in a lot of new ones, but we'll see how that goes. Michigan is not on the list. Dan Mullen in Florida, not going to make it. I do not believe in Kyle Trask like many of them do. I think Trayvon Grimes and the receiving core are very talented. I think they've got a very talented defensive front 7, but I do not believe in this team to get through the gauntlet that is the SEC. Will they make it? No, absolutely not. Just missed the cut. Oklahoma, prove me something. You might be able to make the college football playoff again, but you're not winning the national title. Spencer Rattler's going to be a great quarterback. He's going to put up absurd stats. You know, they're going to go 11-1, 10-2, play in the Big 12 championship game, but I can't watch another Oklahoma thrashing in the national semifinal. You can't. You're tired of it, you know. And then the last team that just missed the cut was Oregon, the Oregon Ducks. I think they're going to return a lot of great defensive pieces. I think offensively they still have talent, but losing an NFL-level quarterback who might have covered up a lot of the blemishes on an Oregon roster leaves me with some question marks. Do I think Oregon is a team that has talent? They recruited well. They recruited the California area very well. But I do not think they are going to be a national title contender. All 5 of the teams that just missed the cut are also in that USC area where they could be dark horse candidates. But I picked USC for whatever reason. You know, it's just a gut feeling. And if I'm right about it, it'll be a lot of fun to rub in people's faces. If I'm wrong about it, they're my dark horse candidate. You know what I mean? So when you look through it, review the criteria, the importance of recruiting, blue chip talent, the head coach, great assistant coaches, and a top-tier quarterback with a favorable schedule and a lot of returning starters. The 8 teams I mentioned all have that. And they have at least 4 of the 5 of these bad boys. So let's see where this season goes. This is my predictions for next year, and I'm excited to reveal them to you. The 8 teams that could win a national championship in college football. Thanks for listening, and as always, don't forget to follow me at Chris Rennie CFB on Twitter, and don't forget to follow the show at Chris Rennie Show on Twitter. This was a joy to do. I love talking college football. If anyone ever wants to talk college football with me, come into my mention. That's why it's Chris Rennie CFB. It's my favorite sport. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is your host signing off. Thank you.